If you have ever tried to learn a new language, you probably know that agonizing feeling of like having a thought perfectly formed in your head.
Oh, absolutely. It's so frustrating.
Right. But you are completely, utterly locked out of actually saying it. Like you are just standing there, someone's looking right at you, waiting for a response.
And your brain just freezes.
Exactly. It just freezes. You are the learner. And today we have a mission to decode this really fascinating source document called Mastering English Fluency Through the 99 Sentences Method. And the entire goal of this deep dive is to show you how to completely bypass the frustration of, complex grammar rules and the total overwhelm of endless vocabulary lists.
Yeah, which is a huge relief for anyone who's struggled with this.
It really is. I mean, we're looking at a core premise that frankly feels like a massive relief. It's this idea that fluency isn't about being like a walking dictionary or having flawless textbook grammar.
Right.
It is simply about speed, natural flow, and confidence.
Which requires a really profound shift in how we approach the entire concept of language, actually.
How so?
Well, I mean, most academic environments, they treat a new language as an accumulation of data. Lists to be memorized, verb charts to be drilled.
Oh, yeah. Endless flashcards.
Exactly. But this source material completely upends that. It argues that verbal fluency operates much more like an athletic skill or a physical reflex than an intellectual exercise.
Yeah. Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand the solution the source proposes, we really have to diagnose the problem first, I think.
Definitely. We have to know what's broken.
Right. So imagine you were trying to stream a high-resolution video on like a terrible dial-up internet connection.
Oh, man. The worst.
Yeah. You click play and immediately you get that spinning wheel on the screen. The video is buffering. The data, the information for that video is technically somewhere in the computer, right? But the output is just painfully slow.
It stutters. It stops.
Yeah, it crashes completely. And that is exactly what it feels like when you are trying to speak a new language. You are buffering.
That is such a perfect way to describe it. The information is bottlenecked. Because, the vocabulary is stored somewhere in your memory, but the retrieval process is severely compromised.
So what's causing the bottleneck?
Well, what the document does so effectively is identify the exact cause of this linguistic buffering. It comes down to one deeply ingrained, almost automatic habit that every beginner relies on.
Which is?
The habit of translating everything from your native language into English before you actually speak.
Right. So the translation is the bottleneck.
Exactly.
I mean, it feels safe, but it's totally killing the speed.
Yeah, we assume we are merely pausing to search for the right vocabulary word. But subconsciously, we are running this very exhausting, incredibly inefficient four-step mental machine every single time someone initiates a conversation with us.
I want to break down that four-step machine, actually, because reading through this part of the source material, I felt cognitively drained just looking at the mechanics of what we force our brains to do.
It's a lot. It really is.
Let's say someone asks you a very basic, everyday question in English, like, what are you doing today? Step one, obviously your brain has to hear those incoming English words, decode the audio signals, and, understand the actual question being asked.
Right. And that first step takes cognitive energy, obviously. But the real friction begins at step two.
Okay.
Your brain subconsciously takes that decoded English question and converts it into your native language.
Wait, so you translate the input inward?
Yes. You effectively change the channel to a frequency where your brain feels comfortable.
Oh, wow. And then comes step three, right, where you actually formulate your response. But you build that response entirely in your native language. You construct the thought using your comfortable native operating system because that is where your personality lives, right? That's where your nuance lives.
Exactly. And then you hit the wall of step four, which is by far the most resource-intensive part of the entire process.
Pushing it back out.
Right. You take that newly formulated native language answer, and you have to force it back out into English.
Oh, boy.
You are digging for the matching English vocabulary words, attempting to apply all the English grammar rules you can remember on the fly.
Like checking for verb tense.
Yes, checking for verb tense, subject-verb agreement, all before you finally push a single sound out of your mouth.
So just to recap, you hear the English, translate it inward to the native tongue, build the answer in the native tongue, and then translate the answer back outward into English.
That's the loop.
That is a massive totally unsustainable amount of cognitive load for a simple, like, I am going to the store response.
It really is. And the consequence of that heavy cognitive load, as the text points out, is absolutely devastating for a learner's confidence.
Because it takes too long.
Right. By the time that slow, stressful four-step machine finally spits out an answer well, the conversation has moved on.
Oh,
The other person has asked a follow-up question, or maybe a third person has chimed in, and you are left holding on to a sentence for a moment that is completely evaporated.
which just reinforces that awful feeling of being stuck and inadequate.
Precisely.
But, I am going to push back here on behalf of the listener, because there is a very obvious counter-argument to all this.
Okay, let's hear it.
Isn't translating the entire point of learning a foreign language? Like, you take the concept of a dog in Spanish or Japanese, and you just swap it for the English word dog.
Right, that's the assumption.
Yeah, I mean, telling someone to stop translating feels like telling someone they shouldn't use a steering wheel to drive a car. It is the core mechanism of how we assume language works.
Well, we have to look at how we operate in our mother tongue, actually.
Okay.
When you speak your native language, you are not translating from some abstract, formless realm of thought into physical words. The idea and the structure are fundamentally bound together.
Interesting.
You have a thought, and the structural framework for that thought simply appears.
It reminds me of trying to run an old classic video game through an emulator program on a brand new computer.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Right, like the new computer is incredibly powerful, much more powerful than the original console. But because the emulator has to translate the old game's code into the new computer's language in real time, frame by frame, the game runs with severe lag. You press the jump button, and like a full second later, the character finally jumps on screen. It works, technically, but the lag makes it basically unplayable.
Unplayable, exactly.
So the source material is essentially asking, how do we get rid of the emulator? How do we run the language natively in our brains to eliminate that lag?
And the solution to eliminating the emulator is preloading the software.
Preloading the software.
Yeah, if translating word by word is what causes the mental lag, the alternative is bypassing the word-by-word construction entirely. You use pre-built templates. This is the entire foundation of the 99 sentences method outlined in the text.
Preloading the software is such a great way to conceptualize it. The document outlines this approach where instead of trying to memorize, 5,000 isolated vocabulary words,
Right.
and then awkwardly trying to glue them together with complex grammar rules during a live, stressful conversation, you focus on internalizing 99 carefully designed, complete sentences.
Yes, and these are not just random abstract phrases. The source specifically curates them to cover the absolute most common daily situations you encounter.
Like what kind of situations?
Well, the text focuses heavily on the structural pillars of human interaction. It prioritizes sentences for introducing yourself, expressing basic opinions, recounting things that happened in the past, making future plans, and crucially, reacting naturally to what other people say.
Here's where it gets really interesting, and this is the part of the source that I think provides a massive aha moment for a lot of people. This whole method is essentially a game of Mad Libs.
Yes.
Remember playing Mad Libs as a kid? You have a full sentence printed on the page, but a few key nouns or verbs are left blank for you to fill in.
The mechanics of that game perfectly illustrate the method's core strategy.
The source gives a great example of this. You learn a full, complete chunk of language, like the sentence, I went to the market yesterday.
Right.
You don't study the pronoun I, and then the past tense verb went, and then the preposition to. You swallow the entire sentence in one single bite.
You own that full grammatical structure.
Yeah, and once that framework is locked in your brain, you just claim Mad Libs. You swap out the word market for park. You get, I went to the park yesterday. You swap it for office. I went to the office yesterday. From that one single master pattern, you instantly gain the ability to speak dozens, maybe hundreds of accurate sentences without ever stopping to think about how past tense verbs work.
What's fascinating here is the underlying psychology of how the human brain actually acquires and deploys language.
What do you mean?
Well, verbal fluency does not grow by hoarding individual words. A pile of bricks is not a house.
Right.
It is just a heavy, useless pile of bricks.
Right. That makes sense.
True fluency develops by internalizing full structural ideas. When your brain encodes the sentence as a complete, singular unit of meaning, it requires virtually zero processing power to use it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So when a colleague asks about your weekend, your brain doesn't have to scramble through the four-step translation machine to find the past tense of the verb to go.
It just bypasses the emulator.
Exactly. It bypasses the emulator, grabs the "I went to the blank yesterday" template off the mental shelf, fills in the blank with movies, and delivers it instantly.
It removes the hesitation completely.
Completely.
But having that pristine template stored in your mind is only half the battle, right? Actually getting it to come out of your mouth automatically, especially when you're put on the spot.
Oh, yeah.
Like someone is staring at you and the social pressure is high. That is the real hurdle.
It is.
But the source material has a very specific mechanism for bridging the gap between knowing the sentence and actually speaking the sentence.
Yes. The text introduces a crucial step that is almost universally skipped in traditional language learning environments.
Which is?
It insists that simply reading the 99 sentences on a page, or even reciting them in a flat, monotone voice, is totally useless. You must combine the repetition of the sentence with intense emotion and vivid imagination.
The source is militant about this.
Very.
If your template sentence is something like, "I'm really excited about this," you cannot just mutter it quietly while staring at your notebook.
No, not at all.
The text demands that you imagine a scenario where you would actually say those words in real life.
Yeah.
You have to imagine your boss handing you a massive promotion or a friend telling you they're having a baby.
You have to physically smile.
Yeah, you have to force your body to feel the energy of that good news and say the sentence out loud with genuine, palpable excitement.
And the reason for this strict requirement lies in how the brain prioritizes information.
Okay, tell me more about that.
When you attach a strong physical emotion to a piece of data, you engage the amygdala.
Ah, the emotional center.
Right. The amygdala flags that specific information as highly important for survival or social connection. That emotional tag helps your brain build neural pathways much faster and much deeper.
Wow.
So it ensures that when you are in a real-life situation that triggers excitement, the English template for excitement is naturally and instantly recalled because they are neurologically wired together.
It brings a real physicality to fluency. The document actually states an absolute hardline rule about this. It says silent learning will never lead to fluency.
Never.
You cannot become a confident speaker just by reading silently on the couch or listening to audio lessons on your commute. Your mouth requires physical practice just as much as your brain requires vocabulary.
We often forget that speaking is a mechanical, physical act. Your tongue, your lips, your vocal cords, these are complex muscle groups.
Right.
They have to be trained to form foreign sounds in unfamiliar sequences at conversational speeds.
It's like if you try to learn a language through silent reading alone, it is literally the equivalent of reading a textbook about the physics of riding a bicycle.
Oh, that's a brilliant analogy.
You can memorize the formulas for gyroscopic motion. You can study diagrams of how the pedals connect to the chain. You can even get a perfect score on a written exam about bicycles. But the very first time you actually sit on the seat and lift your feet off the ground, you are going to fall over immediately.
Because the theoretical knowledge in your mind does not automatically translate to the physical coordination of your body.
Exactly. You have to pedal, you have to wobble, and you have to fall down a few times so your inner ear and your leg muscles physically learn the balance.
Yeah.
The tongue operates the exact same way. The source emphasizes that your tongue must get faster and more comfortable making these specific English shapes.
At first, saying the templates out loud is going to feel clumsy and strange.
Of course.
But as you speak them over and over, that physical awkwardness fades. The mouth learns the balance.
And as that physical clumsiness fades, we see a shift in the internal mental landscape as well, don't we?
We do. Once the mouth is comfortable producing the sounds, the learner can focus on the ultimate goal discussed in the source, thinking directly in English.
Okay, that is the holy grail for any learner. But shutting off the native language in your inner monologue feels impossible.
It's tough.
It feels like someone telling you, whatever you do, do not think of a pink elephant.
Right.
The harder you try to suppress your native tongue, the louder it gets in your head.
But the strategy outlined here is surprisingly gentle, precisely because fighting your native inner monologue is a losing battle.
So how do you do it?
Thinking in English does not mean violently suppressing your mother tongue. It involves starting incredibly small, bypassing complex thoughts entirely, and simply forming direct, basic observations directly in the new language.
The source gives the example of narrating your immediate physical reality, right?
Yes.
You don't start by trying to mentally debate complex political theory in English. You sit in your living room, You look at the object in your hand and you intentionally form the thought, this is my phone.
Exactly.
You look out the window and think, it's a sunny day. You sit down at your desk and think, I am sitting on a chair.
It seems overly simplistic, I know, but the neurological effect is profound.
How so?
By forcing your brain to label the physical world directly in English, you are building direct bridges between the visual concept of a phone and the English word phone. You are completely cutting out the middleman of your native language, training the brain to operate natively in an English mode for basic concepts.
So what does this all mean for the listener who wants to actually apply this today?
Good question.
We have the 99 templates, we have the emotional repetition, we have the physical muscle memory, and the internal narration. Let's say I want to do this. Do I clear my schedule this weekend, brew a massive pot of coffee, and lock myself in a room until I have memorized all 99 sentences?
No, absolutely not. The text heavily cautions against any form of cramming.
Okay.
Cramming treats language acquisition like a history test to be passed, storing the information in short-term memory where it quickly decays.
Right.
Language is a muscle to be developed over time. Consistency is vastly more important than intensity. So, to prevent cognitive overload, the document provides a highly structured, strict, 5-step daily action plan.
Let's really dig into the mechanics of those 5 steps, because the sequence here is clearly designed to build on itself.
It is.
Step 1 is simply learn just 5 sentences a day. The text is incredibly firm on this limit, not 20 sentences, not 50, just 5.
And that artificial limit is essential. By restricting the input to just 5 sentences, you prevent the brain from becoming overwhelmed.
Makes sense.
It allows you to dedicate a massive amount of focus to the structure and nuance of those specific patterns, ensuring they move from short-term recall into deep, long-term storage.
Then we move to step 2, which is where the physical work begins. Repeat those 5 sentences out loud at least 20 times each.
Yeah.
And as we discussed, this isn't mindless parroting. This is where you have to inject the emotion, the physical smiling, the imagination of the real-world scenario. You are forcing the amygdala to pay attention while simultaneously building the muscle memory in your tongue.
That auditory feedback loop of hearing your own voice confidently producing the target language further reinforces the memory.
Wow, that's a good point.
Then step 3 introduces cognitive flexibility. Create variations of each sentence. This is the Mad Libs game in action.
Right. So you take the day's template, say, I need to buy some water, and you start swapping the vocabulary.
Wow.
I need to buy some coffee. I need to buy a book. You test the bounds of the template. You push the framework to see how many different ideas it can hold.
This variation step forces neuroplasticity. You aren't just memorizing a rigid script. You are learning how to manipulate a flexible tool.
I love that.
Step 4 takes that tool and applies simulated pressure. Use the variations in a real or imagined conversation.
Contextualizing the pattern, it's one thing to say, I need to buy a book to an empty room. It's another to imagine you're standing at a cash register, the cashier is waiting, and you have to deploy that sentence to solve a problem. You are training the brain to access the template under social stress.
Exactly. And finally, step 5 is the anchor for the entire method. Review your previous sentences from the days before.
Spaced repetition.
Yes, this leverages spaced repetition, forcing the brain to recall older templates just as they begin to fade from memory, which permanently solidifies them in your mind.
So let's review. Learn 5, repeat 20 times with emotion, swap the words to create variations, use them in a contextual conversation, and review the old ones.
That's the plan.
When you look at the mechanics of it, it's a routine that only takes about 15 or 20 minutes a day. But the compounding effect of that focused daily neurological training is massive.
It really is.
The source sets very clear expectations here. If you follow this routine, you will not be flawlessly fluent by next Tuesday.
No, definitely not.
But within a matter of weeks, you build an unshakable structural foundation, and within months, that translation lag disappears completely.
Engaging in that daily routine, though, especially the parts where you are forced to make variations and experiment out loud, it requires a significant psychological shift.
Oh, totally.
It requires you to confront the vulnerability of sounding foolish.
Doing those 5 steps every day is going to force you to make mistakes out loud. And that requires an incredibly vulnerable mindset shift. Because nobody likes feeling like a child who can't express a basic thought.
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the final and perhaps most vital piece of wisdom the source offers is about giving yourself permission to be imperfect.
Permission to be imperfect.
Yeah, the anxiety of making a mistake is the primary reason the four-step translation machine exists in the first place. We translate and analyze because we are terrified of saying the wrong thing.
We build these massive mental walls of anxiety around speaking, worried about getting the past participle perfectly right, while the person we are talking to really just wants to know what time the meeting starts.
Exactly. The document reminds us that fluency is not synonymous with perfection. Native speakers stumble over their words, they use incorrect grammar, they lose their train of thought constantly.
Very true.
The goal of learning a language is not to become a flawless walking dictionary. The goal is communication. Transferring an idea from your brain into someone else's brain is always more important than grammatical perfection.
Stop making it so complicated, basically.
Basically, yeah.
So, to summarize the core message of this deep dive for you, the learner, ditch the mental dictionary. Stop running that slow, exhausting, four-step translation emulator in your head. Embrace the patterns. Use the 99 sentences as your master templates. Play the Mad Libs game to build your flexibility. And most importantly, physically feel the emotion of the words out loud so your mouth builds that vital muscle memory.
This raises an important question about the psychological impact of this method, actually.
Really? What's that?
When you finally strip away that heavy analytical translation process and you start engaging directly with the raw patterns and emotions of a new language, the way you present yourself to the world fundamentally changes.
Wow. I want to leave you with a provocative thought to mull over today, building right on that idea of forming concepts directly in English.
Okay.
If you successfully follow this method, if you stop translating from your native language, bypass your comfortable native operating system, and start thinking directly in these simple, confident English templates, do you actually develop a slightly different personality when you speak this new language?
That is a fascinating idea.
Think about it. If bypassing your native tongue means bypassing all the cultural baggage, the hesitations, and the specific native insecurities attached to your mother tongue, do you become someone new? Someone a little bolder, someone more direct? Start your 5 simple sentences today. Stop buffering. Speak out loud, make the inevitable mistakes, and find out exactly who your English-speaking self turns out to be. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.